The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
I'm Lola Blanc.
And I'm Megan Elizabeth.
And we're the hosts of Trust Me, the podcast about cults, extreme belief, and the abuse of power.
Now on Podcast 1.
We want to debunk the myth that people who join cults are uneducated, because anyone can be manipulated by a narcissist.
And we should know we both have been.
Join us every week as we explore the world of extreme belief,
talk to survivors and experts,
and share our own experiences with cults and the abuse of power. Get new episodes of Trust Me every Wednesday on Podcast 1 and anywhere you get your podcasts.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we continue our look at the Alex Murdaugh trial. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my abounding co-host, Elick.
Oh, I like that, because it's so close to Elick. Elick and Elick.
I know it is.
Oh,
I didn't know if you'd be insulted.
No, I couldn't you see, like, the Murdaugh twins, Elick and Elick.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it, Brett. You know, I kind of doubted you on like episode 7. First of all, when we're recording this right now, we just released the first episode of the series. And I like how even though you knew we were going to record a 7th episode, you insisted on putting in the title that it was one of 6.
Well, the problem is, as you may have noticed in the last episode, I forgot we'd recorded an episode. So I thought the last episode was episode 5. So I thought, well, maybe we can get it done in 6, which even that was silly. But
I don't think we can get it done in 7.
So, yeah, we're not going to get it done in 7 either. So I will retrofit that later.
No,
get
it's
one
more
out of
fun
whatever
this
we
way.
get to.
You know, it's kind of like the pronunciation of Elick's name. We have no idea where we are.
It's true. We really don't. We're just, and it's made all the worse because we're just recording in marathon fashion. Because yes, Alice, at this point at least, is still pregnant. She's been pregnant forever, guys. I mean, we're like 7 weeks into this, and she's still pregnant.
It really does probably feel like for the rest of the world that I've been pregnant for like 38 months. But in reality,
Yes.
we have recorded like banshees. I mean, I am so impressed with how this is on par with this time last year when we were getting ready for our massive trial and we were recording John Bonet back to back to back to back, which probably led to like a lot of trauma, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
I think back to John Bonet and I was like, why was that so emotionally draining? Oh, we talked about her autopsy like day after day after day after day, you know, on end.
Well, and I'll say this, for those of you who are, mad at me because I'm forcing Alice to record. It is Alice who has been forcing me to record. I just want to lay on the couch, and Alice is like, no, we must record
this
more.
Is actually
So
true. I've been forcing you to record because all you parents of newborns know, and Brett's also been a parent of a newborn. You know how it is. It's totally unpredictable. I could have the world's chillest baby and recording will be no problem. Or history will repeat itself, and because I'm not a chill person, my babies will not be chill, and recording is a little bit harder when you have a little guy who just really wants to hang out all the time.
And look, I said I would record at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I just want to know, I'm being flexible. With Alice, because I get it.
That would be really fun if on a random, just we would randomly do lives at 3 a.m. whenever I'm awake.
There you go. All the folks in Australia would love that. And the people who always say it's too late when we do things. It would be great. Maybe we'll do that.
Well, everyone.
Good idea, Alice.
Thanks. Everyone on the Gallery Facebook fan page, which thank you guys for joining it. We love it. It's just such a fun group of people. All of you guys who are on Alice Baby Watch are probably stop the chit chat, get to the case, because we don't have much time, y'all.
Yes, we should probably do that. As you guys know, unless you just popped in for the first time, we've been talking about the Murdaugh case for quite some time, and we're going to continue talking about it today. Funny thing happened yesterday. We talked some about this op-ed that was in the Washington Post, which I actually thought Jim Griffin wrote it based on the tweet he made. And I don't have the Washington Post, so I couldn't really look at it. Turns out it was written by someone else. He just tweeted it. And the judge was none too happy about his tweet and got on to him. Jim got in trouble. Now, Jim tried to say, look, I was just retweeting it, which the judge pointed out. People have gotten in trouble for retweeting. I will note that Jim didn't retweet it. Jim clearly tweeted it. He chose to go to that article and send that tweet. He did not retweet somebody else, but he got in trouble for that a little bit. And he said he will not tweet anymore for the rest of the trial. And the judge seemed somewhat mollified by that, but was not happy. He said, I'm not a Twitter friend of yours.
Ooh.
Yeah. But he didn't throw him in jail or anything. So,
and I'm looking at it right now. You're right. It's absolutely a tweet in the first instance. It is not a retweet. And he's been retweeted 442 times as of the time of this recording. But that is bold to do. I mean, when you have the jurors who are, admonished for not, to not get on Twitter, to not get on social media, and then you're here tweeting, not good. Not a good look. You should know that.
And let me just say, I can't prove this. I have no inside information. The chances that someone just randomly published an op-ed, which he also called it an article in the Washington Post. It was not an article. It was an op-ed. That someone just randomly published an op-ed attacking the SLED investigation right as the prosecution was resting, and that Jim tweeted that. That was, in my humble opinion, not random. I've done crisis communications before. That was totally a setup. He knew that was coming, and I don't know, just the whole thing was kind of sleazy to me, but I guess he would say, my client's been tried the media for 2 years, I'm just pushing back. But that's not what he said. He said he was just retweeting it because it was an interesting article. I said, okay.
An interesting article. No way that was written without his knowledge, if not even his planning. But that's not what we're here to talk about. It's okay.
That's not what we're here to talk about.
We are here.
That's not the worst thing that's happened.
It's not the worst thing because, man, this case just has it all. I mean, there's going to be so many movies and documentaries about this case, and we are still trying to tell you the whole story. It's still not done yet.
Yes. So we'll shut up and get moving. Let's talk about the clothes in this case. It's been talked about a lot. We've talked about it some in our podcast about what Alec was wearing that day and when he changed clothes and all that stuff. So the prosecution, they called in the housekeeper, Blanca Simpson, and she testified. And she had a few important things for the prosecution that she kind of laid out. First, she said that Alec wanted both Maggie and Paul home that evening. This is obviously important. Paul was not staying at the house every night. He was kind of all over the place. And Maggie, as we've heard multiple times, was staying at the beach. She was having a tough time in Hampton. After the boat case and after the death of Mallory Beach, and after Paul had been charged with reckless homicide, essentially, there had been a lot of people who had turned on the Murdaughs, and there was a lot of sort of stress for her in town. So she didn't like to stay there. She was at the beach house. And in fact, there was work being done on the beach house at that time, work that she was overseeing. So she had no intentions of being there that night. But with his father in the hospital, either legitimately or as a ruse, he calls her and says, "Hey, I want you to come home. My dad's in the hospital. We need to deal with this." And so she and Paul came home, though Paul, apparently the reason had more to do with those sunflower seeds we've talked about before than maybe Alex's dad. So that was the first thing she testified about. Second, she testified that on the day of the murders, Murdaugh was wearing brown leather shoes, khaki pants, and a seafoam polo shirt. This was essentially what he was wearing in the video from earlier in the day shown by the prosecution. This is that video of him near the tree, and he's got on what looked like basically what he was wearing to work, but he's still wearing them even though they're out looking at this tree, and this is the video with him and Paul in it. And this is one of those things that what exactly he was wearing, what brand of shirt it was. The prosecution and the defense have gone back and forth on this. When Buster, he's testifying. He doesn't know exactly his dad's birthday, but he's absolutely sure the brand of shirt he was wearing, and it wasn't whatever shirt the prosecution thinks it was. And I don't actually know how important this is. What is important, though, is what he's wearing that day. Number one, he's not wearing later. And number two, Blanca, she never saw that again. She did wash a pair of khaki pants the next morning, but she never saw the loafers again, and she never saw the shirt again. And this is the lady who did the laundry, so she knew the clothes. She never saw them again, and it raises questions about what exactly happened to them.
And that's really interesting, Brett, because I also am so blessed that someone helps me with my laundry. And I do the laundry as well. And it's something that, because we're always touching the laundry of our kids and our spouses, I do notice when things are missing, because I know some people may think, how could Blanca not remember? How can she say so definitively she hasn't seen these clothes again? But you tend to wear kind of the same things over. You have your favorite, outfits. And when that's your job to clean and to fold, I know that I know like all my kids' clothes, because they're the ones that they reach for a lot, obviously get dirty a lot more often than adults do. But I notice when like their favorite shirt is missing, like my son is always wearing a red polo. And when it's not there, I notice it. And so I just say that she is the person who would have knowledge of this type of thing. And it's noteworthy as well, because leather shoes are expensive, and maybe you'd, get rid of a polo shirt or something, but leather loafers, less so, something that are dispensable. You usually have like your favorite pairs you wear all the time.
And she also remembered something that happened that day that sort of cemented in her mind what he was wearing. I guess she had seen him that morning, and as he was leaving, his collar was messed up, and so she fixed his collar for him. And she remembered that. She remembered fixing his collar for him. So she had sort of had hands on his shirt or whatever, which helped her to remember exactly what he was wearing. But it wasn't just that the clothes went missing. It was something Murdaugh did later on. In the days after the murders, he actually came to her, and he seemed nervous, and he asked her if she remembered what shirt he was wearing the day of the murder. She was confused by this. She didn't really understand why he was asking. The defense on cross-examination will try and indicate that maybe he just wanted to be able to tell the prosecutors and the police exactly what he was wearing that day, and maybe that was the purpose. Obviously, she doesn't know why he asked. She just knows that he asked and knows that he seemed nervous at the time. She also was able to testify about Maggie. She's able to give a window into Maggie that we don't have, because obviously Maggie is gone. And frankly, other than her and a witness we're going to talk about next, there aren't a lot of people who testify about who Maggie was and what was going on with Maggie. And she says that Maggie had some deep anxieties right around this time, particularly about the boat case. She said that they were being sued and that $30 million was at stake. And she told Blanca that they did not have that kind of money. And she also told her that she didn't think Alec was being truthful with her in regards to what was going on in the lawsuit, and this was troubling to her. In addition to this, she becomes the latest witness to testify that in the video that we're going to talk about, the kennel video that's been talked about a lot, this video with 3 voices on it, that she hears Alec on that video. This is obviously important because Alec has repeatedly said that he was asleep on the couch and never went down to the kennels, but she testified that she heard his voice. And this actually wasn't unusual to her, because another thing she tells us about Maggie, which is in contradiction to something that Alec had said in one of his interviews. He talked about how she liked to go down to the kennels and run the dogs at night. And she testifies, Blanca testifies, that Maggie never went down to the kennels at night by herself. It was dark down there. It was scary. It was a third of a mile away, 1,100 feet away, and the kind of place that she didn't want to be alone. And of course, on that night, she wasn't alone. On cross-examination, like every other witness who testifies, she does testify that Alec loved Maggie and Paul and was always a good family man, and sort of the general things of hard to imagine him doing something like this to his family.
Whew. I feel for Blanca. This is a lot. You know, she's just answering the questions that are posed to her, but she obviously knows the family very well. I mean, she has also suffered the loss of two people she knew very well. Whether she liked them or not, I don't know. But to be so close to two really drastic and tragic murders would affect anybody. And you can tell based on kind of the questioning that it doesn't seem like she has an agenda. Like she really is. It appears she is really just answering the question posed before her. And she has a lot of very good information. It's also interesting, to me at least, that when she testifies about Maggie's deep anxieties about the boat case, it's not about, you know, the fact that one of the girls who she has known for a very long time, probably since Mallory was a young girl, was dead, that what effect this could have on Paul's life. It was really about the money. I think that is a really interesting thing to note here. Everyone, again, focuses on different things. $30 million is a lot of money. I don't have $30 million. It sounds like they didn't either. And so I understand that being the anxiety, but like, this is not just about money. I mean, a young girl who they all know very well has died. Her son is, you know, charged with a criminal case that could be completely life-altering potentially. But I think this is all very interesting to see how the Murdaughs were thinking about the challenges that were facing their family because of the boat case.
And I'll say this case, the prosecution's done a lot to try and humanize Paul and Maggie, which you're going to do in every case. Obviously, neither Paul nor Maggie deserved what happened to them, and it's a terrible tragedy, but just like every victim, they weren't perfect. And in some ways, they might have been less perfect than most victims. This from Maggie is kind of in keeping with things that you see when you look at the history of the Murdaughs. This is what she's concerned about. The family was really not that concerned about Paul's criminal charges, it seems. It seems like they really felt like he was going to beat those charges, probably in part because of the work they had done early on to make sure that the evidence in the boat case was tainted and it was going to be hard to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Paul was involved. The civil case is going to be a lot harder. I mean, they're behind an 8 ball on that because of everything that goes into a civil case, the lower burden, and the fact that it was their boat and Paul was very drunk, and it's going to be hard to get out of liability there. So I think she was much more concerned they were going to lose that case than she was about the criminal case.
Indeed. Talking about humanizing Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, also testifies. Marion is Maggie's older sister, and Maggie had told her that Alec wanted her to come home that day. And she thought they were going to go visit his father and or mother. Father, because of course he had just been admitted to the hospital. Mom, because she had dementia. Now, this is interesting since Alec didn't try and take Maggie with him when he left to go visit his mother that night. Alec had told her that Paul would be there as well. And strangely, Maggie didn't really want to go back to Moselle. Remember, she was at the beach, but it was Marion who encouraged her to go. Marion also testified that Alex spoke to her about the murders, and she had asked, which I think any family member would probably ask, you know, do you think who did this? Do you think they suffered? And Alec actually said to Marion, whoever had committed these murders must have thought about it for a long time. Marion didn't have any basis to know why Alec would say that. Alec didn't explain why he thought that. And something else that Marion testified as to what Alec said, by the way, real quick sidebar, you guys have asked about hearsay. Even though Marion is talking about what Alec told her outside of court, it can come in because it is a party opponent admission. Alec is on trial here. He's a party opponent. So anything he says comes in. It is not hearsay. And that's why she's able to talk about what Alec said. So Alec told Maggie and Marion's mother that he had taken a nap the night of the murders and that he had never gone to the kennels, which obviously at this point in the trial, we know is not true. Obviously, Alec was heard in that video, and so far the defense has not rebutted the fact that it's Alec's voice down at the kennels right before the murders. Marion also testified that Alec was very intent on clearing Paul's name in the boat case. In fact, he told Marion that this was his number one goal, to clear Paul's name, which really stuck with Marion because she thought it strange that, his number one goal was to clear Paul's name when Marion and probably the rest of the family's number one goal was to find out who killed Maggie and Paul. In Marion's point of view, who the heck cares about the boat case? The boat case is over because Paul is gone. Someone has brutally murdered him and we want to know who it is. And we're afraid for the rest of the family. What about Buster? What about Alec? Whoever the psychopath is who killed Marion's sister and nephew might come back for more of the Murdaugh family. But Marion testified that Alec never seemed scared and afraid of the people out there who had killed his family. He also told her that neither Maggie nor Paul suffered. We've heard a lot about the gruesome state of Maggie and Paul's bodies and what led to their deaths. It's just not true that they didn't suffer. They didn't die upon the first shot. They attempted to run away or crawl away, and it was very close range, devastating shots that ultimately killed them. And so for Alec to say that they didn't suffer is simply not true. Now, you might be able to say, if you're an advocate for that, he's just trying to comfort Marion. What good is it to tell her that they suffered? Might as well just think that they peacefully died and didn't see it coming. But that's still a strange thing to say in this circumstance.
And Marion's one of those witnesses who relatively short witness, much shorter than some of the police officers and experts you've heard, but really packs a punch because she makes some points that are really powerful. The fact that just conclusively showing that neither Maggie nor Paul were going to be there that night if it weren't for Alec and if he hadn't been so insistent that they be there. And if you're thinking about alternate suspects and you think this is some, at this point, I think we're being pushed to think it's some sort of revenge or message to Alec because of maybe he owes a drug debt or something, or it's some sort of blackmail thing, or who knows, but it's some sort of message to him. Well, it's interesting that whoever it is who did it knew that they would both be there when they had no plans on being there until that day. And really the middle of the day, they decided to go down there. And that makes it really hard to think this was a planned attack by someone else. The other thing is Alec is telling her this same lie that he's told other people, that he was never at the kennels, that he was sleeping on the couch. And then you have this very subtle point that the prosecution gets out. And I think the story the prosecution is going to tell in closing is going to be so interesting. You guys listening to this will have heard that by now. We haven't. We're still working through the case in the trial. But Alice, on some of the lives we've done, has made some really good points about legacy and about how much Alec cared about legacy and how this has been framed in terms of money, but it might be more than that. It's more about the 100 years that his family had put into building a name for themselves and protecting that. And this notion that Maggie and Paul are both dead, but Alex still is trying to clear Paul's name in the boat case. Now, obviously, without the downside of, if he doesn't, all the money that maybe would be lost because of it. But he's still trying to clear his name. And it sort of goes to that legacy idea and makes you wonder what exactly is driving Alex Murdaugh and what are the things that are most important to him It makes you wonder about that motive and what exactly the motive is if he did commit this crime.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Brett. I mean, we'll go into it more as we talk about, theories and motives and what we think actually happened. But I really do think that's something important to emphasize, because we hear a lot of people say, I don't know, I just don't think money is enough to cause a man to kill his own flesh and blood and his wife, or, the concept that you murder someone, your own family members, just to buy yourself a little bit of time to distract people doesn't seem enough to be a motive. I think those all miss the point. They may have some elements. He may have thought of those things, but the reason we started at the very beginning of the timeline in the 1920s is to show you that Alex Murdaugh didn't just drop onto the Low Country in South Carolina. He is the fourth generation of Murdaughs who run this town. There is a lot of pressure of being a Murdaugh. There's a lot of privileges that come with it, but there's also a lot of pressure. And, we'll talk more about basically, whether he was helping or hurting his family legacy, but that is no small thing. And especially in these kind of family dynasties, honor and family is everything. And that's why you kind of have these inner corruptions. And that's why you have his father, Randy Murdaugh, coming to the hospital after his grandson almost died in a boat crash to make sure that the legal case goes well, instead of being a grandfather and checking on the health of his grandson. It's because the protection of the family name is paramount. It is the very identity of who these people are. It's not just money. It's not just power. It is truly the id of the Murdaughs.
So one place you would think there would be some powerful evidence for the prosecution, but it's really kind of is the blood. So SLED did a lot of testing for blood, and they tested a lot of different things for blood. They did find a presumptive positive for blood on the steering wheel of Alex Suburban. But this is one of those things that it might be powerful were it not for the fact that he had gotten back in that car after he supposedly checked the bodies of Paul and Maggie. There was also a presumptive positive on his shirt and shorts, but once again, same problem. If he's checking Paul and Maggie with these clothes, there's going to be blood on them. And there was blood on the shotgun, which we talked about as well. He got it after he found the bodies. So now somebody was talking about that they thought it was weird that Alex, who's so smart and he's the head of this law firm and he's been a prosecutor, and yet he made so many mistakes. And one thing we always talk about is murderers always have a plan and it always goes wrong. It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. Murdering someone is the ultimate punch in the face. Even though you're doing it, you can't control all the variables, and so you're going to make mistakes. But if he did it, he did some smart things too. There is absolutely evidence of him planning this out and being very thoughtful in the things he did in order to explain away evidence. And you see that in this blood evidence. Now, they also tested Alex's shirt, and they found that it was negative for blood, although it did have Maggie and Alex's DNA on it. But how significant is it to have non-blood DNA of Maggie on his shirt? Probably not all that significant. The defense was also on prosecution. The defense was also on cross-examination, able to punish SLED a little bit because they did things like they used some tests that weren't all that helpful that basically made the clothes untestable after that. And we talked about this before, and some of y'all are always surprised by the notion of testing destroying evidence, but it absolutely can, and this was a circumstance in which it did. Now, one thing the government also did is they tested for C.B. Rowe's DNA. Remember, he of the hit squad who Alex suggested in his first interview might have been responsible, and they didn't find any of his DNA on any of the areas they tested.
It's always hard when you're talking about DNA and family members. Obviously, blood is something different, but he was there. We know he was there. He said all those things, that he touched their bodies after there was blood. And so it's almost like a wash. Like they had to test for it, but it doesn't really tell us too much, I think. Okay, the video, the famous video we've referenced and you've probably seen in lots and lots of news articles. A powerful moment in the trial was when the prosecution played the video that Paul recorded the night of his death, really probably moments before his death, at 8:44 and 49 seconds p.m. This is a video of one of the dogs in the kennel belonging to Rogan Gibson. In this video, 3 voices are heard clearly. They are Paul, Maggie, and what sounds to the whole world like Alex Murdaugh. Rogan Gibson testified at trial, and in his testimony, he did identify Alex Murdaugh's voice. He told investigators he was 99% sure it was Alex's voice in an earlier phone call he'd had with Paul. On the stand, Rogan said that he was 100% sure that the voice on the video was Alex. Notably, though, on cross-examination, this is not challenged, which I think is really interesting. Even though there's not much of a difference between 99% and 100% generally, that 1% could potentially be reasonable doubt, right? There is a chance, there's a 1% chance you're wrong. Now, if you're going to quantify what reasonable doubt is, I do not think 99% that's much higher than reasonable doubt if we're going to percentile it. But you would think they would dig into what makes you so sure now. That removes all doubt. Previously, you left room for some doubt because you couldn't have known. You didn't see anything, did you? What's changed now? Is it because you have some vendetta for this man? It's because, whatever. You would just think there'd be some soliloquy as to how could you possibly be 100% sure when previously you didn't say that. So I'm actually really surprised that this wasn't challenged on cross-examination. Do you think that was an oversight, or did they just want to leave it alone because Rogan's testimony is already so bad for...
Well, I think they probably had some police reports where a bunch of other people had been played that video and they said, yep, that's Alec. And I think at some point they just had to decide, we can't fight this. Like, even though our client lied to many, many people about never being down there, it is just so clear that it was him that if we fight too hard, we're going to lose on it. And this is why I just wonder if he's going to testify, because I feel like this is such an important point, and it's a point that the prosecution has hammered over and over and over again, that he lied about where he was and he lied about being at the kennels. I think Alex Murdaugh cannot be acquitted unless he gets on the stand and explains why he was there and what happened immediately afterwards. He has to tell that story. And I think that's another reason there's no point in challenging it, because at some point he's going to admit it, or the defense is going to admit it in closing and try to explain it away in some way. But I think the only person who can do it is Alex. And if he doesn't do it, I'm sorry. To me, the fact that he said he was asleep on the couch, and in fact he was down there at the kennels right before they were killed, to me, there is no reasonable doubt. He's going to have to create some. I am convinced. When you hear that video, I am convinced. So now I need to hear something to make me less convinced. So he needs to testify. He needs to explain why. And if he doesn't, I think there's going to be a lot of jurors who are going to vote to convict. And when they're asked why afterwards, they're going to say, because he said he wasn't at the kennels where the murders were committed, and I heard his voice, he was there.
Yeah, that is a hard fact to get over. And I hope, if it's never rebutted, I really hope the prosecution hammers on it, because it is just so hard to work your way around that, especially when they're just not even challenging it at all. Not just with Rogan, with really any of these cross-examinations of people identifying Alex's voice in the video. Now, like Brett has already pointed out, this is entirely inconsistent with what Alex has told law enforcement. Remember, he had said he fell asleep on the couch, never saw Maggie or Paul again. He never explains later on why that may not be the case. And he tells not only law enforcement that, but he tells other people, like Marion's parents, Marion and Maggie's mom. Other witnesses heard him say that he never saw Maggie or Paul again that night after dinner, the very, very quick dinner. And here's what's really interesting. Obviously, the camera is often trained on Alex during trial because people, love reality TV and want to see how he reacts. Rogan testifies on the stand that he heard Alex on the video in front of Alex. Like, he is right there. The courtroom is not that big. And the camera is right on Alex's face, and he seemed completely unfazed. Like, not even blinking his eye. Sometimes people have bad poker faces. They'll shake their head no, a silently mouth no, or something like that. If a witness is saying something that they disagree with, there's no gotcha moment. He literally is just like, okay, it could have been just another day for him. So this is just confusing. Without him testifying, did he lie about whether he was out at the kennels or was he confused? We don't know what it was. It's maybe you were confused. Maybe you did fall asleep and you woke up at a time that you thought was something different. You know, none of this has been explained so far. And I think you're right, Brett. I think he will have to be the one to explain it because the defense certainly isn't bringing up anything right now that sounds like an explanation of this massive, massive contradiction in Alex's statement and the hard evidence. So the whole reason for recording the video, this dog kennel video, was actually to immediately send it to Rogan, who had tried to see something on a FaceTime video call earlier, but couldn't. Remember, this is his dog. There's something wrong with the tail, and they're in the midst of troubleshooting mode. And because the FaceTime call had failed, that's why Paul had turned to a video, and he was planning to send it immediately to Rogan so that they could figure out what was wrong with the dog and what to do next. But that video was never sent off of Paul's phone. So whatever happened to Paul must have happened really soon after this video was taken. And based on kind of the activity of his phone, we do know that it was very close in time to him finishing recording this video because his phone goes dead pretty soon after, within, I think, seconds after the end of that video, and is never used again.
When an online shopper places an order, how that package arrives matters. I'm Al Coe, the CEO of ShipStation. Our promise is to make that process as easy as possible for you. ShipStation provides a robust platform to manage everything you sell, automate manual shipping tasks, and get the lowest possible carrier rates. Keep your team and your customers happy. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.
The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Guys, when you're at your best, you can do anything. And when you feel your best, you feel like you could conquer the world. But the fact of the matter is, especially seems like these days, it is really easy to get bogged down. It is really easy to feel overwhelmed. And it's really easy to feel like you just can't get out of it. And when you feel that way, you're not going to get much of anything done. It is possible that working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you. And that's why we want to talk about BetterHelp today. BetterHelp can help you feel empowered and help you feel more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It is convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. You can find someone that you're comfortable with, you're comfortable talking to. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to reach the goals that you want to reach. And that's what BetterHelp is all about. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/prosecutors today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/prosecutors. The Prosecutors is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey guys, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. Am I right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots in your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't know that I love meat. I love eating it. One of the reasons I love the keto diet is because you get to eat as much meat as you want. But I got to tell you, these days, with inflation the way it is getting hard to find high-quality meat at a price you want to pay. Enter Butcher Box, one of our favorite sponsors on The Prosecutors. With Butcher Box, you can easily find high-quality meat and seafood you can trust. It's like having a butcher at your fingertips. We're talking 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, pork raised crate-free, and wild-caught seafood. And it is the ultimate inconvenience. It's delivered right to your doorstep, free shipping always, and it's curated to customized box plans. Recently, my wife and I were trying to decide what to eat, and we had a rack of ribs in the freezer from Butcher Box. We pulled it out. We got the grill just right. We cooked them for a couple hours, and they were delicious. And they were a lot cheaper than going out for them. You can have that too. You can get a variety of high-quality cuts at an amazing value with exclusive member deals. And in fact, if you join Butcher Box today, you can get free chicken nuggets for a year and 10% off your first box when you sign up today. That is a 22-ounce bag of gluten-free chicken nuggets in every order for a year when you sign up at butcherbox.com/prosecute and use code prosecute. What are you waiting for? Claim this deal at butcherbox.com/prosecute and use code prosecute. Yeah, and that brings us into the tight timeline, which is something both sides have tried to use. The defense, they will say, look, there just wasn't a whole lot of time here for him to do this and cover it up. And that's sort of one of their arguments they use. The prosecution on their side is saying, yeah, there's not a lot of time, and there's no way he couldn't have been there when this happened. So let's talk about the timeline a little bit. The reason this video is so important, the reason his voice is so important, is because whatever happened had to happen in a very narrow window of time. So Paul is recording this video at 8:45 and 47 seconds. He reads his last text message at 8:48 and 58 seconds. His phone locks forever 3 seconds later, so at about 8:49. Maggie reads her last text message at 8:49:26. Her phone locks 2 seconds after that forever, so at about 8:50. Now, Paul will get a text from Rogan, who he has been in constant communication with all day about this dog, 9 seconds later at 8:49 and 35 seconds. So Paul is responding to a text. He's reading a text. Maggie is reading a text. And then right before 8:50, Paul gets a text, but he never reads it. In fact, even though he's been in constant communication with multiple friends all night, sending texts, Snapchats, every few minutes he's sending something throughout the night, but then it just stops. And it just stops at the same time that Maggie's communications just stop. Another interesting thing, Paul's battery had been dying all night because he's been using it constantly. At 8:43, so a good 6 minutes before his phone locks forever, it's at 2%. Now, this is like the ultimate advertisement for Apple and their batteries, because this is at 2% and it's still working. He's recording videos and everything else, but it doesn't die until 10:30. I know Apple's got great batteries, but it's not lasting that long unless you have stopped using your phone. You're not using your phone anymore. You're not looking at it. The backlight's not coming on. Nothing is happening. And what that tells you is this murder likely occurred by 8:50, or if not, then shortly thereafter. And we're talking minutes after. Fast enough that neither Maggie nor Paul, and that's what's interesting about this, it's both of them. If it was one of them, maybe you'd say, well, Paul's battery was dying, so he decided for the first time all night he was going to conserve it. Okay, well, the problem is Maggie's doing the same thing. She also isn't using her phone. And in fact, they never use their phone again. And the other person's phone, who's interesting, is Alex. What is Alex's phone doing during this period of time? Well, we don't know because it was off. And the iron law of cell phones, as handed down to us by Heather Ashley of Big Man True Crime, is if your phone is off, you're either being murdered or committing a murder. And I feel like that is...
She is not
really
incorrect.
Yeah, she is not incorrect. And there's going to be a lot of testimony about Alec and his cell phone use, and that he was always on the cell phone. And in fact, if you don't believe that, look at his cell phone use as he's driving back and forth. So you have to believe that Alec essentially gets home for reasons that are unclear, even though he's constantly on his phone, and even though his father is in the hospital, and you would think he'd want to be able to be reached, he turns his phone off while he's up at the house, leaves it off, falls asleep on the couch, and only turns it on at 9:02. So that's 12 minutes after it seems like Paul and Maggie are dead, or at least their phones never have any activity on them again. 12 minutes. Yes, that is a tight timeline for the prosecution. It is a tight timeline for him to do sort of all the things that you would expect him to do, but that is a long time. That is a long time for him to still be there at the property with his phone off, that just so happens to cover the period of time when it seems like his wife and child are being murdered. And we know he was down at the kennels. We know he was down at the kennels, at least when that video is being recorded at around 8:45. So let's assume for a second that the 8:50 number is right. Give him 8:52. Give him 8:55. You have to believe that he leaves essentially right after that video's over, manages to get back up to the house where he grabs his phone and turns it on at around 9:02. Which the other problem with that is you got to think the first thing he'd do when he gets to the home is turn the phone on. So you would think he would get to the home closer to 9:02 than 8:50. But nevertheless, let's just assume all this is true. He had to do all that to avoid being killed himself. Because if these murderers showed up, they would either kill him or he would witness the murders. So you either have to believe he got up there and avoided the murders, or he in fact knew about these murders and just never said anything because somehow he survived them, maybe because he was being, blackmailed by the cartel that we were talking about. In any event, he gets back up to his house. He turns on his car at around 9:07. And once again, this is nearly 20 minutes after Paul and Maggie used their phones for the last time. And in that 20 minutes, they're receiving multiple text messages and phone calls from other people, including Alex Murdaugh. He is making it even worse. It's funny because he's creating an alibi for himself on the one hand, because he's calling his wife and child. But the other thing he's doing is confirming their time of death, because when he calls them and texts them, they don't answer and they don't respond. So the idea that they were killed sometime after he left the house, it just falls flat. It just doesn't make any sense. They were dead while he was still on that property, whether he did it or not. And it is basically impossible to believe anything else is true, which means the shooting would have happened while he was there. And yet he heard no gunshots. The defense is going to try and deal with this later on with an expert who I found completely unbelievable. We'll talk about him when we get to him. But recall, these are a lot of gunshots from very powerful weapons in a place where you would expect sound to carry. This is only about 1,100 feet away from the house. All these gunshots would have been made, and yet he hears nothing. He sees no other vehicles. He sees no headlights traveling down the road. All you have is this vague thing he tells the police where he thought maybe he heard a car pulling up, but he didn't see a car. And he doesn't see any headlights, even though it's pitch black out at night. Somehow, he is completely oblivious to the bloodbath that is happening within walking distance from his home.
You know what's really chilling for me about his cell phone being off, not just for 10, 15, 20 minutes, his phone's off for about an hour, Brett, is that he's clearly down at the kennels, meaning his phone's already off at 8:44 when the video is being made. And he's talking on it. His voice sounds normal. Right? It doesn't sound heightened. No one's fighting. He's not stuttering. There doesn't seem to be heightened emotions. He's talking as if he's just having a conversation with his son and wife. But because his phone is off, and if this were planned by him and he shot his wife and son, it means that this was absolutely premeditated, because he had to have turned his phone off an hour earlier. And while you heard him talking on that video, he already knew what he was going to do in a matter of minutes. And that's just so chilling to me, because this was not a situation where he tried to backtrack and erase data on his phone or smash his phone or something like that. His phone was off well before they were murdered. And I don't know, that fact just really punches me in the gut, because this is not a heat of the moment situation.
Yeah, and you hear Maggie and Paul on that video, and they're having a good time too. They're talking about the dog running around with a chicken in his mouth. Everyone is completely oblivious to what is coming, other than, if he did this, Alec. And you're 100% right. Like, he planned on killing them or someone when he went down to those kennels, and that's why he turned his phone off. That's why he left it at the house. And he's waiting for something, either the perfect moment, little unclear what, but at some point he strikes and kills them, and then comes back up to the house and does whatever he needs to do in that very limited amount of time when he's up there. And then he starts heading to his mother's to create an alibi. That is essentially the prosecution's argument about what's going on here. And you can see some of this in the calls themselves. So Alec calls Maggie at 9:05:15, and he lets it ring for about 15 seconds. Then there's another call at 9:06:14, and this call lasts only 3 seconds. At around the same time, Maggie's phone orientation changes, indicating that someone picked it up. Later, the prosecution will say that Alec has deleted these calls from his phone, and they don't appear on the cell phone extraction they did from his phone. Maggie's phone will eventually be found off the side of the road after a family member uses Find My iPhone to locate it. Why this happens, why the phone is taken away, why it's thrown out on the side of the road, where frankly it probably never would have been found were it not for this thing they were able to do, is a little unclear. It's also unclear why Alec called Maggie. As I said, it also indicates that she's dead at that point because she's not answering the call. The innocuous answer is trying to get a hold of her, though the 3-second call is strange. He doesn't let that thing ring for very long at all, and it happens to coincide with someone picking up the phone. There is a possibility, though, that he is calling the phone for the reason that a lot of people call their wife's phone or have someone call their own. They're looking for it, and when you call the phone, it lights up, it rings, or whatever, and you can find it. The fact that the phone has been taken and thrown away means that for some reason, he or whoever did this thought there was something on that phone that was problematic. Irony is it was actually Paul's phone that was problematic, but they took this phone. One possibility here, people talk about this video and whether or not he knew about the video, and it's unclear whether he knew about the video. We know at some point he picks up Paul's phone. We know that because he says he did. Imagine he did it around the time of the murders. Maybe he sees there's only 1% battery or 2% battery. And maybe in that moment he thinks, well, there's no way he was using his phone to take that video. He was probably using Maggie's. And maybe that's why he takes Maggie's phone to get rid of it, because he thinks the incriminating video that may or may not have his voice on it might have been from Maggie's phone. That's pure speculation. It's hard to say exactly what's going on around here or why these calls are happening or why they're so short. But to me, it's a pretty believable timeline for him looking for the phone, and that's why he's calling it.
And here's what's so strange. If that video is correct and it is Alec's voice, and again, so far there is no contradiction that it's his voice on the video around 8:49, and he's trying to reach Maggie just minutes after that, he was just with Maggie. He knows where she was. Let's say he got back in his car and went back up to the house and is about to go visit his mother with dementia. Because Maggie is newly back in town, you would think that he'd want her to go with him, or instead of calling her 3 times, why not just drive the car on his way out of the property by the kennels to say, hey, Maggie, what I was trying to tell you when I was calling you is X, Y, and Z. Cake is in the fridge. I'm going to see my mom. Come with me. What have you? It's not like he doesn't know where she is. He was just with her based on that video minutes before. So if he can't reach her after a few calls, you would think he'd do something as simple as just swing by the kennels, which could be on his way out, to tell her whatever he was trying to tell her before he left.
Right. And it's so funny. This video is so damning for him. And I was talking about this with my wife today, and without the video, he might well get off. His story might well work. But all of this, the text messages, the phone calls, the expert who testified about the gunshots and when you can hear gunshots, it's all premised on the idea that he's sleeping on the couch with the television on. And so he hasn't seen them. So he hasn't had an opportunity to tell them where he's going. And so he needs to call them. But in the real world, Alice is 100% right. If he was down there by the kennels, he would have said, hey, I'm going to go grab my phone and go see my mom. Do you guys want to come? Okay, cool. I'll see y'all later. Jump in the golf cart or the gator or the four-wheeler of one of the many ways he had to get up and down from the kennels to the house, ride up to the house, grab his phone, maybe even change clothes, jump in his car, and drive off. There would have been no need to call his wife, who he had literally been with a few minutes before, and tell her why he was leaving. He would have told her that when he left Paul and Maggie at the kennels. So the whole thing is just absurd. I mean, his whole story is absurd, and it's made absurd because of this video.
But I do think what you said resonates a lot with me. The 3-second call is not to leave a voicemail, but rather when you're looking for a phone. I do this all the time. When my phone falls, between the couch cushions, my husband will call my phone for just a couple seconds so that we can hear it, see where it is. Orientation changes if you're picking it up in order to find it. But I don't know. I'm still a little bit stuck on why he or the killer would get rid of Maggie's phone, but not also Paul's. The 1% perhaps, but you've got to know that there's a lot of data on it before the phone dies. Clearly no additional data is going to be coming on the phone now that Paul's dead, but it's still a treasure trove of information. And also where it was dropped is likely going to be found because it's still on the property. It's not like it's, over a gully into another property or onto public lands. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it was out of panic, but it wasn't a very good disposing of potentially very key evidence.
And look, there's another possibility. I mean, just thinking of possibilities about why you would do that. And it honestly really seems much more likely that Alec would want to get rid of those phones than some random killer. But another possibility, he shoots them both. He has to be fast about this because he needs to get his clothes changed and he needs to get out of there as soon as possible because he wants the timeline to be as tight as possible so that it seems like his alibi works better. Maybe he runs up to Paul, reaches into his pockets, and doesn't find the cell phone because he doesn't realize it's in his back pockets. I don't keep my cell phone in my back pocket. I wouldn't normally do that because I wouldn't want to sit on it. And maybe just in the rush and in the dark and in all the adrenaline, he feels in his pockets, he doesn't find anything, and for some reason thinks he didn't have his phone. And then he runs over and he finds Maggie's phone and he thinks, I bet this is the phone they were using when they recorded. And then he leaves. And then remember the weirdness about, he tells the police that when he finds the bodies, he goes to turn over Paul. Remember, he needs to touch them. He needs to touch the bodies because he needs to get the DNA on it. So imagine he does that to get the DNA, to get the blood he needs. And when he does, there's Paul's cell phone. And he pulls it out of the back pocket like he says he does. He says, I pulled it out and then I thought better of it and I put it back down. Maybe he pulls it out and he's thinking, there it is, I got to get rid of it. But then he thinks, there's no time. It's too late. I can't do that. Hopefully there's nothing on it, and he just puts it back down. And this goes to my sort of theory that when killers tell a story, there's a lot of truth in what they're saying, but they're not actually telling the truth. They're using true things that happened in the story. And so I could imagine that is the moment where he realizes, yes, Paul did have his phone after all, but now it's too late for me to have gotten rid of it. Hopefully all the incriminating stuff's on Maggie's. That's one possibility.
You know who could tell us? Maybe Alec, but we're getting ahead of ourselves because what we do know, since we haven't heard from him, whether he's going to testify or not, we do have his steps. Because like most of us, Alec's phone records his steps. The prosecution did a pace analysis of the steps that Alec was taking before and after the murders. And before the murders, he was averaging a maximum of 31 steps a minute, which is not that fast, right? It's a pretty leisurely pace, about 1 every 2 seconds. At 9:02, when he supposedly woke up from his nap, till 9:06 when he turned on his car, he was averaging about 70 steps a minute. So he was walking more than twice as fast in that 4-minute span than he had before. Remember, we've talked a lot about this, that it's not the point in time that matters, it's the comparison. Because maybe he's just a fast walker. He walks fast all the time. But that's not the case based on his own metrics. He was basically sauntering around, and then for 4 minutes, he was frenzied. He was moving at twice the speed he was before. Remember what we talked about. If you want a tight timeline, you got to move fast. You got to hustle to change your clothes. You got to hustle to get back up to the house, to get rid of a phone if that's what you need, to get into the car so you can drive at a very high speed limit to get to his mom's house where he's going to stay for a shorter amount of time than he tells the caretaker he's going to. Everything is to rush the timeline so that it appears there's more time that passes by than actually has passed by.
And this is another place, that 20 seconds that he took when he found them, because we heard so much from the defense that, well, the reason it only took 20 seconds between when he found them when he called 911 is because he's rushing around then, because he's found them dead.
And yet, they also measure his steps when he supposedly found the bodies. And even then, he only gets up to 61 steps per minute. So later on, when he's calling 911, he is actually moving at a slower pace than he does when he purportedly wakes up from his nap to get in the car to drive to see his mother, which you've got to think, if he was sleeping on the couch, he bolted out of slumber and immediately ran to the car. For what reason, we don't know. His mom was already
This
asleep.
is another one of those. And this is another one of those things we talk about with circumstantial evidence. This sole piece of evidence, you know, you might say, oh, well, I can't believe they're trying to say he's guilty because he walked faster at one time than another. No, that is not what we're doing. That's not what the prosecution's doing. But this is one piece of circumstantial evidence. When you fit it into the rest of the puzzle and you see everything else that's going on, it is striking that his pace is so much faster around when he would have been covering up the murders than at any other point during the night.
Something we haven't talked about yet in these episodes is Alec's drug use. On May 6th, Paul leaves Alec a voicemail saying that his mom found several bags of pills in his computer bag. Alec will later reveal that he's addicted to opioids. This is news to everyone at the time. This is not something like that he'd been dealing with for years in terms of it being public knowledge. In fact, his lawyers will claim that he had a $50,000 a week habit. That is a lot of money on drugs, like a lot of money on drugs. We'll talk more about that in a second, but Brett and I prosecute drug trafficking cases like by cartels, and $50,000 a week would be typical for like a massive drug trafficker to move that much around. But I don't think I've ever prosecuted a case where the personal use was at the $50,000 a week habit level. I don't even think physically you could take that many opioids and not die. But we'll get back to that in a second. That's what they've alleged. They do run forensic searches on Maggie's computer on that day, May 6th, when Paul allegedly told Alec that Maggie found all these pills. And the searches do indicate that she's trying to figure out what kind of pills Alec had in the bag. And you can usually do this because opioids and most kind of controlled substances will have something stamped onto the face of the pill. It's usually a number, a color, letters, and you can search those identifiers to figure out what kind of drugs they are. And that appears to be what she's doing. So it seems like she did, in fact, find these pills and didn't know what they were.
And the prosecution's closing up their case, and we're sort of coming full circle here, too, because you're starting to see something the prosecution talked about in their opening statement. This gathering storm that was descending upon Alex Murdaugh in the days, weeks, and in fact, on the day of the murders. We talked about motives. Don't get so hung up on the specific motive. It's more all the things that are happening that just seem to be happening right around when the murders happen. It's impossible to get into his mind, but you can see how things are starting to slide. This is a month before the murders. A month before the murders, there are two people who find out that Alex Murdaugh is taking a lot of drugs, Paul and Maggie. In fact, it's Paul that tells Alec that his mom's figured it out, that he's doing this. And then, in fact, in the voicemail it says, you need to come here because we need to talk about this. This is at the same time when all the financial problems are starting to come in. And that brings us to the financial motive, which is such a huge part of this case, and the prosecution has been talking about a lot. Now, the parties argued in pretrial about the financial motive, whether or not it would come in. As we said in our legal briefs episode, 404B episode, this kind of prior bad acts, other bad acts evidence can be problematic, and you don't always want to let it in. If you want a deep dive on that, check out that episode. We talk a lot about it. Well, the court sort of reserved ruling on this, and the prosecution at various times have argued it's not only relevant for the motive, but also the defense is opening the door because they keep asking questions about how isn't Alex Murdaugh an amazing man who loved his family? And can you imagine any reason he would do this? And at some point, we basically go into an in-camera mini-trial. In-camera just means outside the presence of the jury. So the jury sort of has a couple days off. And during this time, the prosecution is able to put on the witnesses who testify essentially to what they would say if they were allowed to testify before the jury. And the whole reason you do this is so that judge can make the ultimate decision about whether or not the requirements of 404B are met. After these couple days of testimony, which it's great testimony because since it's not in front of the jury, it's a lot more raw. People asked, will they watch the video of that? No, they have to come back in and testify, and it's much more constrained than it is in this. But man, they're just letting it fly during this period. So if you're interested in this case and you want to watch some of the court, this is the most interesting part when they're doing this. And at the conclusion, the court says, yeah, this stuff is coming in. And the information that eventually was presented to the jury is that Alex Murdaugh had been defrauding clients, including some very close friends of his, since 2011. And he was able to pull this off because everyone in the firm trusted him. But the information was all there. And we talked about this some when we talked about the timeline. The firm was working with this Forge consulting company to structure settlements for people. Well, Murdaugh, he's opening an account under the name Forge, hoping that no one would notice. And in fact, for a very long time, no one did notice because, not surprising, that people called Forge Consulting Forge and would have made out checks to Forge that were intended for Forge Consulting. So everything was going fine for 10 years. Everything's going fine. He's getting away with this. But now the drug habit's been discovered by his son and his wife. The boat case is reaching a really important point where there's a motion to compel that's going to be argued in just a few days. Paul's trial is getting closer and closer. And then on June 7th, the day of the murders, the firm found out that and talked to Murdaugh, Alex Murdaugh, about the fact that there was nearly $800,000 that should have gone to the firm that had gone to him instead, $792,000 to be exact. And this was the first time that Murdaugh knew there was a problem. This is the first pebble in a landslide because he knows it's so much more than $792,000. And even if somehow he could cover that, if the firm keeps looking, they will discover everything he's done. His career will be over. He will go to prison. He will lose everything. And his family's legacy that they have built over a century will collapse. And these facts were delivered to the jury in the form of really powerful testimony by the firm's financial manager and a firm partner. And later, the prosecution shows text to Russell Lafitte, who is the former head of Palmetto State Bank and currently a convicted felon for his involvement in Alex Murdaugh's fraud. And these texts were sent 4 days before the murders. It was a text from Alex to Russell Lafitte saying that he needed to extend his farm credit line another $600,000. Now, what's interesting about that $600,000, his buddy, Chris Wilson, who we've talked about before, had actually taken care of $192,000 of this $792,000. So Alex needed $600,000 to cover this. And this was 4 days before the murders. He's asking, can he get the $600,000? And he says his father would co-sign for him and asked how much turnaround time this would take. That's 4 days before. Clearly, he's trying to stop this from coming out. But then, 4 days later, not only does the firm discover it, but his father, who was going to co-sign for him, who was backing him up on loans, suddenly he's in the hospital and he is facing a terminal diagnosis. And you can just imagine that the entire world is collapsing on Alex Murdaugh on that day. And wouldn't you know it, that just so happens to be the day that his wife and son were murdered.
Brett, when you put it all together like that, I don't understand people who say that the financial information and what was happening to him in the days leading up to the murder was not incredibly stressful. I have immense stress hearing about how the house of cards is crumbling around him, and it doesn't have to do with my own life. I mean, truly everything that he's been able to ward off has been because of the veneer of who the Murdaughs are, right? It's not just that the law firm was turning a blind eye. He was the boss. I mean, they are the founding family of this law firm. They're, those of you who have been part of companies where there are larger than life figures who either founded the company, run the company, know what it's like. You trust them. It's their, why would they do anything to jeopardize the company? It is, the company is their family, is their very livelihood. You defer to them on all important matters. I mean, he's been able to get away with it because of who his father is, who his grandfather is, who his great-grandfather is. And all of that is getting wiped away in a matter of days. And it's actually quite amazing how quickly it all falls apart.
And there's a reason the prosecution closes on this information. They bring it all back around. It's been a slow trial at times. At times it's felt like the prosecution was never going to get to the point, but we knew they would. And we knew they would do it at about this time, right as they're getting ready to close their case. And they're dropping all this on the jury to really leave an impression, and then they're going to come back in closing, and you're going to hear the same story again, and they're going to tell the story again. And Alice is right. Those of you who follow true crime, it is strange. There are so many people who'd rather kill their family than embarrass them. There are so many people who'd rather kill their wives than admit something terrible to them. And it always blows my mind that there are people like that, but you see it again and again. And sometimes these sort of financial collapses lead to exactly these kind of murders. So whether you buy this or not, it isn't rare, and it happens a lot. Whether it happened in this case is obviously a decision the jury is going to have to make. But when you combine all of this stuff together, this is why I love circumstantial cases, because each little piece may not convince you. This alone may not convince you. But combine this with him lying about where he was. Combine this with the tight timeline. Combine this with, the steps increasing, or the missing clothes, or the fact that he's the reason they were there at the family. All the little things. It comes together and it forms a pretty strong picture. At the end of the prosecution's case, the defense does what it always does. It's a requirement. Everybody does it. Move to dismiss the charges and grant a judgment of acquittal because the prosecution has failed to meet their burden. That was obviously denied in this case, and we're going to move forward to the defense's side of things. And we've said before, the defense doesn't have to say a single thing. The defense could say, we're not calling any witnesses, we rest, prosecution hadn't done its job. They are in a position, I think, and I think they recognize this. When the prosecution closed its case, they had to put on a case, and they were going to attempt to tell their story and start to chip away at this story the prosecution has told and undermine what seems like really solid, damning evidence. They're going to try and tell the other side, the side that shows that, in fact, this is a terrible set of coincidences that came together for Alex Murdaugh. Yes, his life was falling apart, and then it got even worse when someone murdered his family. And they're going to attempt to do that, and we're going to talk about that more in the next episode or two, depending on how long the defense goes, and if Alex Murdaugh ends up testifying in his own defense.
Woo! That was a lot, Brett. I can't believe we made it through all that.
I know. It was a lot. And we're not done, Alice. There's more done. Murdaugh trial to come. But we're done for today, so that means it's time for you guys to let us know what you think at Prosecutors Pod, prosecutorspodcast at Gmail. Actually, no, that's not our email. prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Hello on YouTube. Leave your comments there. Give us that thumbs up. Subscribe. Do all the things that people tell you to do when they're talking to you from their podcast. Leave a 5-star review on Apple. Remember, if you leave a comment or a question, we'll answer it in the podcast. And if you send us a screenshot, we'll make sure you can take part in our next live episode. Well, Alice, is there anything else you want to share before we sign off?
No, I'm really excited to dive into what the defense is, because we have caught up in our recording almost with what's happening in real time with the trial. And I didn't think that was possible. It also shows you just how long this trial is. So I'm excited because we're following now kind of in real time as we record. And we'll see if we make it through. Verdict or baby first, who knows?
Who knows? An exciting race is underway. We'll have to see. Well, guys, we will be back next week with more of the Murdaugh trial, even if it takes us a month or so to record the next episode, because who knows what'll happen in the interim. But either way, until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
Baby's
the baby's name is not
It's
Brittany.
not Brittany.
Guys.
Oh my God.
I'm convincing, but come
did
on.
Did we really have to release an episode on April 1st to clarify that her name's not Brittany?
Whatever, that's the April 1st episode. It's going to be me telling everybody that Brittany's been born.
That's actually pretty good. Done and done.
Oh, man.
Really, whatever Heather Ashley says is true. So I think we need to just change her birth certificate now to say Brittany.
Brittany, Heather Ashley, Alice Jr.
Big Mad.
Big Mad. I love it.
Big Mad. She goes by Big Mad. Which is actually pretty accurate.
There you go. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Y'all are the best. I've missed you, Brett. I've missed you a lot.
I missed you too, Alex.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.